Welcome everyone who's here. Thank you for joining. This is the Ashoka Huddle on restaurants and chefs that trigger nourishment economies. In a moment, we'll introduce more about what that means. My name is David Strelnick, and after just a brief introduction to everything we're doing, I'm going to help facilitate today's discussion, along with these three other remarkable social entrepreneurs in this field. Joining us are Marta Echevarria from Ecuador, who helps steer what's called the Kumari Rainforest to Table initiative with chefs in Latin America and indigenous communities in the Amazon rainforest. Marta, thank you for dialing in from Ecuador. Sean Sherman, the sous chef, as I just mentioned, who's the creator of the Tatanka food truck and a new Native American food restaurant and training center in Minnesota, in the United States. And then joining us in a few minutes, we hope, she's having connection problems right now, will be Sylvia Banda in Zambia. Sylvia is the founder of Silva Food Solutions, which includes catering services, restaurant, food processing for the World Food Program, and a food system program at a local university. And one of Sylvia's remarkable accomplishments is that in the development of her enterprises over the years, she's now trained and sources her products from over 20,000 local smallholder farmers who farm in traditional ways to fuel a very vibrant and successful business operation. So thank you all so much for joining. As a brief introduction, this is part of our new series of monthly Ashoka Huddles with social entrepreneurs and other affiliates, intended to help us compare and push on the insights and the challenges and the opportunities for spreading approaches and enterprises that are built around the great many benefits that result when we connect nutritional relationships between natural ecosystems, soils, farming, and human health and wellness systems. This is the pattern we call nourishment economies, and you can see a great deal more background and examples and other information about this at our website, which is www.nourishen.com. Now I want to make the most of our time here, so let's jump into where we are. Our goal today in convening together is to really compare and push on insights and ideas and challenges that we face, so that this video, which is being recorded, can then be used to distribute to others and help each of us think about how we design and operate these kinds of enterprises around the world. So today's questions and discussion focus on how to do this. Hope and Sylvia will jump in. Just by way of an introduction, briefly, Sean and Marta, can you tell us the nature of your business? Like, roughly how many customers do you serve? How do you count that? Is it per month? Who are these customers? Why do they choose to work with you or your enterprises rather than others? Is it taste, convenience, price, values? Just give us a bit of a flavor of your operation. Sean, can you start?
Okay. Well, we have kind of a multifaceted business at the moment. We're based in the Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota region. So we have a catering operation that is live in Minneapolis, and we are a caterer in the city. So we do many kinds of events, anywhere from 20 people on up to, I think we've done up to 2,000 people. So probably averaging around a couple hundred people usually. So our catering operation is extremely busy. We have the food truck, which we have done really well with, and we just go to many different kinds of events. We get asked to come to many different areas. So between those two businesses, we serve a lot of customers within the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Another part of our business is that we travel around to different regions and do educational components. We talk about the work that we do and the research that we've done and our vision and philosophy. And we put on a lot of pop-up dinners and food demonstrations. So we reach a lot more people in other kinds of exhibitions and gatherings around the nation and around the world, really, because I'm in Denmark for a couple events, and I'll be in France here in a couple weeks too. So, we've been doing really well about reaching a lot of people with the work that we're doing, and this first restaurant that we're getting ready to open, hopefully later this year, if everything works out, then we expect that to reach, even more. So we're hoping to reach, a lot of people in a short time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Marta, how about, what's your version of that story?
Well, specifically for us in the work that we're doing right now in distributing Amazon products in Quito, Ecuador, we are getting to 14 restaurants, and it's about 50 customers per week. So it's still very small scale, but it's an entryway to appreciating and hopefully developing a whole range of products from the Amazon. Initially, in the case of Ecuador, with producers that are indigenous or rural producers in the sort of mixed chacras or small farms where you get a whole range of products. Our interest is to use that as a way to support what we are really aiming for, which is a movement of rainforest to table, as you introduced me. And it also means reiterating something that many chefs have been doing for quite a while, and we're just linking up and networking through our work as environmentalists to make it a much bigger social movement, ensuring not only wonderful food, but food that is supporting conservation, that is supporting cultural, values, and also biodiversity and livelihoods.
Super. Thanks. That's so just so everybody knows, the background on this Nourishment Economy series that we're launching here, and the other work that I do, is on trying to build enterprises and social initiatives that are built on the value that is created and the immense range of benefits, social, cultural, financial, economic benefits, physical benefits that result when you connect nutrition in natural and in human beings. And when you connect it in a cycle that reinforces each other, right? This is what we call a nourishment economy. Marta just articulated that really well. Thanks. Let me give a little flavor, because I want people to know about Sylvia's work if she can't join. Sylvia Banda in Zambia. It's a similar story, but she's ways down the road, in the sense that, let me start with the end of this story. Sylvia has now trained and sources her food products from over 20,000 smallholder farmers in her region. And that's because her catering, restaurant, and food processing business has grown so large, right? And so Sylvia's focus is on nutrition and traditional cuisine as the driver of market demand for healthy, regeneratively grown food, right? We'll talk a little more about that. I just wanted to toss that in. So one of the, as we try to distinguish what's the difference between a wonderful, tasty, sustainable foods restaurant and a regenerative growth nourishment cycle restaurant, right? There's a slight distinction there we're trying to understand better, because we see certain restaurants that are sustainable in all of their practices and doing great things, and we see others that actually seem to be stimulating the broader community around them in additional ways. And so that's one of the things we wanted to talk about today. I wanted to turn back to the two of you, Sean and Marta, and ask, how do you source your ingredients, your food products? Is there an intentional linkage to what I just said, or is it just a coincidental benefit? How do you go about it? Again, Sean, if you don't mind discussing, and you've told me some interesting things before about paying attention to the traditionally not only cultivated but harvested wild food.
Yeah, so the way that we've structured our business is we prioritize our purchases from indigenous vendors first off in our region, because that's what our business is all about. It's about indigenous culinary. So we try to create some economic opportunities for indigenous peoples in our region by purchasing as much as we can, because with the businesses that we're doing, we're popularizing this really great, healthy indigenous food, and we're able to purchase a lot. So for us in particular, for the Minneapolis region, we try to buy a lot of our fish from the Red Lake Reservation, which is north of us, and we purchase some hand-harvested wild rice from a few different reservations around us, and maple sugar, and we work directly with a couple of native-run farms around Minneapolis who are trying to grow out a lot of cool heirloom varietals that are particular to our area, because we have such great history of native agriculture in our region too. So we want to showcase some of these heirloom seeds that are still out there. I'm also on the board with one of the farms, Dream Wild Health, which is in our area, and I'm also on the board with Seed Savers Exchange, just to be close to as much of that heirloom seed stock as possible. So I can see in the future, as we grow bigger as a restaurant and are able to stretch out larger, we're just going to create more economic opportunities for people to be able to purchase. So we really try to support that business. And our big vision really with the restaurant is bigger than just opening a restaurant, because what we want to do is to open up this restaurant and educational center, and then be able to train and teach people about the indigenous food systems and all the curriculum we've been building. And then we want to open up satellite restaurants directly in the indigenous communities, so they have an opportunity to have those foods available to their communities. And we want to help them to kind of build their own infrastructure by growing community gardens or redesigning their permaculture landscapes so there's food around them, and just kind of creating microsystems for them. And then we hope to be able to take that system of a large city, restaurant, training center, and satellites and move that around not only the United States, but hopefully into Canada and Mexico.
Nice. Let me, so I think you just described focusing really heavily on heirloom, traditional, wild, original foods and ingredients.
Well, so the biggest part of it, with the foods that we're buying, they are the traditional foods of the region. So there's so many regions and variety throughout North America. We would be excited to be able to help open up many across the nation, because there would be so much diversity through indigenous food businesses, and people would be able to see that firsthand, and it'd be a tangible business piece, but it also helped bring economic prosperity back into a lot of those indigenous communities. So, not everywhere or across North America had agriculture, but everybody was utilizing the wild foods directly in their area and being a part of the ecosystem. So knowing how to sustainably harvest the foods and keep them growing every year. But all these foods are traditional to the people that are living in those regions. And so a lot of it is tying back to some of those cultures. And, tribes have varying degrees of how much food system they have left traditionally. Some of them have quite a bit of it left, and some of them have lost a lot over the span of history.
Yeah.
So we want to do our best to be able to create something that not only brings the health and spirituality back through their own foods, but also creates that point to showcase it and create a business out of it.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. That's sort of what we call the Nourishment Enterprise, and by nourishment we mean that full cycle. You're increasing the vitality of both the earth and the people. And it sounds like you're operating on your sourcing at the intersection of both sustainability and traditional foods. I mean, you've got to sort of pay attention to both, because you could certainly, I imagine, go out and exploit traditional foods until they're gone.
Yeah, and that's not the purpose that we're shooting for at all. So.
Yeah. Flip back for 1 second, then Marta, I'm going to ask you the same question, but Sean, one more follow-up. So flip back to the first question I asked you. Why are your customers coming? That's what you're trying to achieve. Are they coming to the table because they have that cultural awareness? They're excited about supporting your mission? Are they coming because it just tastes really good? Or you're able to come in at a price point that's low enough that it's better than the McDonald's next door. Like what's bringing them to you? That's that half of the business equation.
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above because we're hitting so many different points. You know, people are interested in native agriculture, people are interested in wild foods, people are interested in native culture in general. So we have a lot of native people who are just really interested in wanting to know more and learn more about the culinary side of their culture. There's a lot of non-native people just really interested in learning more about their own territory and area because, you know, if you're from the US or Canada, and if you have European descent, you can still appreciate all this history of the landscape because the indigenous food systems are such a much better representation of the food of your area, and it's just a better understanding to be in there. So we are just hitting, you know, many people with many different interests because we're talking about an entire food system and not just one piece. It's not that we're just doing wild foods or doing native corn heirlooms. You know, we're doing all pieces. You know, it's food preservation, salt production, sugar production, it's cooking techniques. It's, you know, we're trying to mix all of it in to make it unique for every region that we go in.
And so that you've got to sort of, both in terms of your vision, but also in terms of the success, you've got to be thinking holistically. You're thinking about all those pieces. Thank you. Let me mention, before turning to Marta, that Sylvia in Zambia reports that she can see us and hear us, but for some reason we can't see and hear her. So Sylvia is with us in spirit. And I want to mention also a couple of others who are participating right now and will be a big part of this dialogue following this Ashoka Huddle and other things we're doing. Bill Carter, who's one of the founding board members of Ashoka, phenomenal social entrepreneur from Zimbabwe named John Wilson, who does work throughout parts of Africa with communities on sustainable food systems, is listening and watching today. Also, Arthur Getz is in Spain paying attention. Arthur is a real thought leader of urban food systems and nutritional relationships and multilateral policies in this arena. So thanks to the three of you for joining and paying attention and helping with what we're doing. So Marta, what's your version of the intentionality of how you source products from community?
It's also right now a very mixed bag of reasons. Really, more than anything, I do think it's a sense of taste, of trying new things. It's the curiosity that a restaurant, especially the high-end restaurants where there is more of a gastronomical focus, people are interested in seeing those products, in viewing and tasting new things. At the same time, I do think there is a growing concern about valuing our cultures, knowing what Ecuadorian culture is about, that Ecuador is an Amazonian country. And we also, you know, looking at the rest of the members of our Kumari movement, which we set up with Forest Trends and AMAS in Peru and World Wildlife Conservation Society and many others that came into this, because I really want to highlight that this is not just us or one entity, but it's really aiming to be an ecosystem. Sort of as Sean explained, we want to bring chefs, we want to bring conservationists, we want to bring in communities, indigenous rights, all those issues, because we want that nourishment economy. And so there are many people who all of a sudden say, well, if I can make my choice in a restaurant, maybe I want to go to the one that is going to give me all those other values. In our case, we are aiming to the high end because we think that we want to shorten the value chains to make sure that there's a higher value for the products for these indigenous communities. And that takes us to your initial question, which is, you know, are we sourcing from indigenous communities? So an example of what we're doing, for example, we're highlighting a fish that is produced by the Cofan ethnic group, which is between Colombia and Ecuador, but mostly lives in Ecuador. There are only about 3,000 Cofan as a population, and they manage a really large area that because of a huge struggle are managing almost 300,000 hectares. And the paiche production, which paiche is one of the largest fish in the world, it's like a sturgeon, and it is an incredible, tasty fish that they are producing in ponds, and we are ensuring that that production gets to the high-end restaurants in Quito. So just one anecdote, but like that, there's going to be many along the way. And what we want to make sure is that has the safeguards to ensure that it's a sustainable production. We're not aiming for the same traditional productivity and profitability issue, but rather highlighting how there's more than just the economic value of these products.
Awesome. And the customers are valuable.
Everybody just can't believe it. And if you know, I mean, I think if there's incredible biodiversity in the North America, think about the biodiversity of the Amazon.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We're in mega diverse areas and our food systems are not using all that. So the potential is enormous. Of course, always to ensure that there's safeguards so we do it in a sustainable way.
Let me draw out a point, a lesson from our work. So I've been working with Ashoka for about 10 or 12 years with social entrepreneurs like you guys around the world. On the underlying drivers of successful system-changing innovation, system-changing new ways of doing things. And in the last 5 or 6 years, we really focused on what became this nourishment economy pattern that we observed happening, taking off in here and there in Ireland, in the US, and Ecuador, and other places. But something that the two of you just mentioned that I want to draw out is how the cultural connection finds its way into the business. This is a pattern. This is important. And I think that it's often downplayed in more quantitative analyses of environmental or farming or food systems. And yet we're seeing it over and over again as a very powerful driver of very successful, what are becoming very large-scale enterprises. I mean, again, Sylvia's got 20,000 farmers supplying her. That's not small. That's not just a little incidental project somewhere, right? And what's interesting to me is that we see sometimes it's the food that's the entry point that then begins to tap into the environmental sensibility or the cultural connection of the consumer. Sometimes the entrepreneur, like yourselves, will start with the cultural piece and let that lead the consumer back into the environmental or the food or the health pieces, right? Something I think Sylvia would mention, she's shared a lot with me about in the past, is actually how she was concerned about food security in her country in the face of various environmental and other threats. And was witnessing the decrease in traditional food consumption in both urban and rural parts of the country. So she started with a traditional foods restaurant, fairly small scale, which she needed farmers to produce traditional ingredients, right? And the traditional food grabbed everyone's attention to the point that she now caters 2,000 person events, similar to what Sean said, right? Around the traditional cultural connection and the taste that they remember from their childhood or from when they lived more in the countryside or still in their current life. Let me ask another question to Sean and Marta, which is whether, and this comes out of Sylvia's work and out of our own work, which is whether the nutritional aspect of the food is an intentional piece of your operation, whether the evidence we have that traditionally raised or organically raised foods, but in certain ways are not only often better for the land, but turn out to be in subtle ways in terms of your own microbiome and micronutrient absorption and other things in your body, they turn out to be healthier for you. for Sylvia, that's a real driver of her business now. She's become an advisor to the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. She's an ambassador throughout Africa on these topics. And so she really puts nutrition at the forefront of what we're doing now, even though that's not actually how she began her enterprise. Is that on your radar? How much on your radar is that? Marta, what?
Well, for us, it's a huge issue because just so that you know, most indigenous Amazonian communities are losing nutrition. And even the colony, you know, the areas, the new cities that are cropping up, they're in the middle of the most biodiverse ecosystems, and nutrition is failing. And it's mostly because of economic choices that are being made, with food being imported from out of the Amazon, and convenience of using the modern looking food like rice, like ramen noodles, Coca-Cola, right? Which is modern, and we don't, and it's devaluing the traditional.
So let me interrupt for 1 second just to say that was Sylvia's story 10 years ago.
Exactly. So
what she said. No,
exactly. So, and at the same time, there are discussions with, for example, some literature at some point saying how the basis of the Amazonian food is the yuca, the manioc, as a product that doesn't have so much value, right? A nutritional value. But if you look at it, you know, it was always complemented with other things. It was hunting with a certain protein that was complemented. It was with nuts. It was with vegetables, you know, different kinds of complementarity. So that whole nutritional question is something that we haven't worked on much, just because we are a recent sort of effort. But we're very concerned about that. And we do think that getting these enterprises going, making sure that we have this close relationship with the producers, with the chefs, beginning to innovate and position these products, is going to take us back to really understanding, okay, how is the community doing? How are they using the resources that are being sold abroad or out of their community? How do we make sure that they're safeguards so we are really valuing these systems? And another anecdote, for example, something very common throughout the Amazon is a product called tucupi in Colombia or Brazil, ají negro, black chili, if you want to call it, in Peru, and also neapia in Ecuador. And it is this incredible, basically a Vegemite that was made from yuca from throughout the Amazon. And basically the communities, as they go hunting, they need to make the soup. They add this flavoring to their soup. It also added to the yuca bread, right, the cassave, and it becomes this wonderful, tasty umami that has all the chefs amazed. And so we're really working with some product like that to be the entry point to all this discussion about nutrition, about fermented products, about the millennium knowledge, you know, the knowledge that these communities have had for millennia that we're losing. And, you know, now there's the whole big hype about fermented products. But, you know, it's just one way of looking at it. But I do think the nutritional value is really important. I think people who come to the restaurants do want and are concerned about that. But I do think that it needs to be something in the forefront of our work and in our decisions to ensure that we're not belittling in any way the nutritional heritage of these systems.
Well, and thank you. And let me mention that in our work with you know, entrepreneurs in a lot of countries, and I mentioned Bill Carter, who's listening in. You know, he led the Ashoka program in 40 countries that was looking specifically for entrepreneurs in these topics over the last 5 or 6 years. And there's a whole set of them, you, like the leading innovative thinkers and doers on these topics, who actually come out of the health and wellness sector, who've come back towards the nutritional food products which they've then identified as being produced effectively in natural farming and natural food preparation systems, not exclusively, but clearly, right? Who came at it because in their health clinics or in their own health and wellness work, which has been system changing in their countries, they identified certain types of foods and dietary supplements as increasing the nutritional baseline of the person, so that the traditional medical interventions then work more effectively. So we're seeing HIV/AIDS work and other very important work where the traditional medical approaches appear to be much more successful when built upon a nutritional platform in the patient, in the sick person, right? Which is rooted in, I'm going to call it natural foods, right? And for natural foods, which both do nutritionally, for reasons which the formal science sometimes, is working. We know that from the scientists we work with. It nourished to the nth degree, which is my organization, right? Is that there's interesting questions that aren't proven in the clear analytic science, but they're also not disproven. They're suggested that this is a very active area of the scientific work around micronutrient content, the effect not just on your body, but on the biome in your own stomach, and how you therefore absorb the macronutrients and other ingredients, and how all of these things correlate with the natural or farming, natural harvesting or farming practices in which the food was produced to begin with. So this all weaves together, and part of what I'm trying to say, Marta, is that, building off what you said, or reflecting on it, is that sometimes the food system can become the driver for improving nutrition for a community or in a community. Sometimes the health and wellness story can become a driver for the food system. From my view, having the wonderful privilege of working with a couple hundred initiatives like yours, I don't care which one's driving the system, because what we see is, and sometimes it's the cultural thread. Whichever thread pries it open, people quickly begin to see the whole story, and it builds on each other. That's why we call it a nourishment economy, a nourishment cycle, a regenerative cycle. Sean, what do you think? How do you address that? Does it matter? I know health and wellness in the communities you work with is a profoundly important issue.
Mm-hmm.
How intentional?
For me, growing up on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, which is the third largest reservation in the U.S., and statistically, it's been the poorest area in the United States ever since probably the 1940s, if not ever since its inception. But you can look up statistics on Pine Ridge, and they're not going to be pretty. It could be upwards to 60% type 2 diabetes. It could be mass obesity, heart disease, and just a lot of issues. So we look at the work that we're doing right now with understanding indigenous food systems. And when you see the point at when indigenous communities lost their traditional foods and stopped harvesting and doing things in the traditional ways, then you see that immediate and rapid decline in health across the board. And the biggest part is really, even to answer a bit of this question that's open on the thing here, Joseph Collins asking, for nutrition, many of the indigenous foods have less Western nutritional research than mainstream foods. Is that problematic? So really, we look at how the diets were. So we look at the commonalities of how people were eating. So we look at the entire food systems, and we're able to break it down. So we have to understand if there was agriculture, what kind of seeds were they growing, what kind of farms were they growing, how were they doing everything. The wild foods of their region, how were they sustainably living off of these things. The plants, the animals, the preservation, all of it. So we can really go backwards and reintroduce traditional food systems pretty much anywhere. Our focus is North America because it's a gigantic continent, but all of this information is pretty much usable anywhere that colonialism happened and there's indigenous communities. So getting people back on their traditional diets, one of the biggest commonalities, at least through the Americas, was that people were living off extremely low glycemic diets, high in vegetable, and a huge diversity of vegetation, low salts for the most part, lots of great fats, lots of seeds, lots of nuts. And you can find that in most communities traditionally across the board. So being able to get people to want to eat a more traditional diet can only be beneficial, because it's easier to tell people and get them to realize, especially in the indigenous communities, why they should be eating traditional, because it's a part of their culture, and it's a cultural, it's who you are, it's identity, it's cultural identity. So, and it's easier than to tell people to eat healthy, because everybody knows they should eat healthy foods. They should eat a carrot over a Snickers bar or whatever. But, you know, we want to not only popularize it, but really make it exciting, which is why we think having food businesses is such a great way to do it, because it's something that is tangible, and we can showcase that these healthy traditional foods can be delicious and beautiful and affordable, and it's for the community, and it's something that people can be proud of in their own community. And every community is slightly different, because as we look across North America, we just see an immense amount of variety, and it's unfortunate that it's so homogenous right now. If you drive across the country, you're going to find the same hamburgers and the same Coca-Cola and the same beer. And it's the same story in, you know, in Canada, even slowly in Mexico, little by little. So we want to really get people to understand the beautiful regional, historical flavor compounds and variety that sits everywhere. So if we can help open up indigenous restaurants across the country, across the nation and continent, you just see that immense amount of diversity, and health would carry along with it, just because of the nature of that diet. So one of these, by creating this nonprofit that we're working on to try to open up small food businesses directly into the indigenous communities, we want to directly impact them and giving them that chance to have those foods and giving them an understanding of why they're important, and really make a difference in the health and help to turn around a lot of those pieces and directly combat, you know, type 2 diabetes and obesity and heart disease and even tooth decay. And mental health in general, from all that spiking with the high sugar diets that everybody's on, and the high starch and, you know, high processed foods. So showing people how to work with these very simple foods that have always been there in their communities, because it shouldn't be hard to know how to work with dried corns and dried beans and dried squash and whatever other tubers might be out there, and the wild foods that are around you. So we see an immense amount of benefit, and the work really is to steer towards a healthier lifestyle all around throughout communities.
Well, and I think an observation and excitement in our work is that we see that when this does, I hear Sylvia Banda's voice. Sylvia, hello.
Yes. Hi, David. How are you?
Xavier, we're so happy to hear you.
I'm so happy too.
Welcome, Sylvia. Let me finish the observation I was going to offer, and then turn the microphone to you for a couple of minutes. Okay?
Very good. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out, that makes me happy. I wanted to point out that we see some communities where the combination of things that Sean and Marta were just discussing, the cultural reinforcement, the slight connections to the food and the taste, the economic opportunity, they all begin to fit together, and the community flips into being a proactive rather than a reactive community, a proactive nourishment community, a community where the people begin to see that, right? And let me say this, I'm from a town of 400 people in the mountains in California, right? A small community, right? I know everybody, and I can push and poke, and so I speak this now from my personal homeland as well, but where people flip from being told that they should be doing things a certain way by a government or by an advertisement or by somebody else, to realizing, wait a minute, this is cool. There's an opportunity here to be healthy, for my babies to be healthy, for me to have food that tastes good, for me to actually not have to spend so much of my money at the store on food that comes from somewhere else, for me to actually have more wildlife in my neighborhood, for me to like experiment with fun recipes and pull out my grandma's recipe box. In some parts of the world, for me to begin to stabilize water systems, because this kind of farming helps the earth absorb more water, which means my land is more resilient when a drought or a flood comes. for me to make money doing this. Suddenly, the energy is local, right? And what we've seen is that it isn't, but it usually takes that combination of different factors in the community. Just one or two of those, what I call nutrient value chains, isn't enough. But when enough of them, stimulated by organizations like yours, when enough of them begin to converge, suddenly you get this buzz, this little beehive of activity. Suddenly you better get out of the way because the community is going to take off with it, right? That's my that's my vision, that's my hope. This is part of a series of these huddles we're having, and one of our listeners today, again, is an Ashoka Fellow named John Wilson, and I hope that he'll join us as a panelist in one of these future conversations about exactly this, which is about how communities do or don't adopt that energy and that beehive mentality and that sense of ownership and proactivity. Because John is just a wealth of experience around parts of Africa on this topic. Sylvia, welcome. It is so nice to hear your voice. I don't know if you heard us talking about you a few times. If you did, I'd like you to please correct anything I said that is not accurate. But also, can you go back and tell us a little bit of your own story of how do you go about designing a combination of a restaurant and a farming system and a catering business like yours? What's most important as you set about this task? Sylvia, are you there? Okay, Sylvia, if you can still hear us, if you jump back in at any moment, we'll give you the microphone. So please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The internet is unstable, and most of the times I could not hear, but some of the things I'm able to hear. But if you are able to hear me, maybe let me just start talking about pick up from what you have just said.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Yes, the way we run our restaurants, as you get the background, we started in a small way, working with the farmers. The reason why we have been working with these farmers, we want them to dry the products which suits our standards. That is the reason why we train them first. And once we have trained them, we become the market. We buy the local foodstuffs which they train. We invented the solar dryer ourselves. And this is the solar dryer now, which has been commercialized. And next month, they come to buy these solar dryers in order for them to give to their farmers. We have 3 types of solar dryers. The smaller one, medium size, and the bigger one, which if it is bought by the these NGOs, they give them to the community so that they are able to dry a lot of vegetables at one go. When these farmers bring the products to our place, we have popularized the use of these indigenous foods, which for a long time people had neglected them, or maybe they are underutilized. But we have done so well. I'm proud now that each time I walk into the bigger hotels, I could see that they've got room to serve the indigenous food because of the many programs which we have done to popularize it with these same farmers. By the way, we have trained over 20,000 farmers who are on our database, whereby each time we want any type of product, all we have to do is just one email, and those products actually will reach our doorsteps. Now coming to the manner in which we have done to popularize our products was that one of them, we were holding competitions, Cook of the Year competition, where we invite the farmers to come from all the provinces to come to the capital city of Zambia, which is Lusaka, for a good 3 days. And we invite the government to come and do, to officiate at the program. It was from there that the First Lady, whom we invited to be the guest of honor, through Cabinet Office, declared the program to be an annual event. And then with the materials which we gathered from all these people in the 10 provinces of Zambia, and we have even crossed into Mozambique, where we have trained also 5 districts. We've also crossed into Tanzania, where we have trained 2 provinces. We decided to get the materials, and we have published the Suntan Cookbook. It's a very, very good book because it has got all the indigenous recipes. And most of the universities have actually acquired our book, and they're using it for as a reference book. So it is from this that also we decided to, bring nutrition in the restaurants, whereby right now, if I told the government they have visitors and they want to showcase indigenous food, they come to us in order for us to provide the traditional food. Plus what the many more things which David have already talked about. I don't know if I still have a little bit of time. I can continue. I can stop here, and I can continue later. David, have you heard me?
Yes, yes, Sylvia, we can hear you well, and it's fascinating and important. Let me mention just for our viewers briefly, you just saw Dana Thompson join the screen for a moment. Dana is a partner of Sean Sherman, and she's currently logged in as a presenter, but that's who that woman was that appeared for one moment. She's part of the team. But Sylvia, please continue.
Okay, fine. Yes. The reason why, David, we train these farmers is that we want to maintain the nutrition through the whole value chain. The purpose is that the indigenous vegetables and fruits reach the clients. It should not just be probably just eating without getting anything. We want to maintain and to retain the nutrients there. And also, you have seen that from the many farmers that we have trained, there are a lot of testimonies when you visit them, because we have a very good tracer system where we follow these farmers to find out how they are doing. This is where we listen to a lot of testimonies where they tell you to say, before we went to their community to train them and they start buying from them, their children were not going to school. But because of training them and also empower them economically, the children have gone back to school. And also, apart from that, these same products, we have done quite a lot of innovations on them, whereby we don't just sell them as dried vegetables. We have a factory where we process them. And once we have processed these vegetables, we make soup, the traditional soup. We call it pumpkin leaf soup. We have also made another soup, which is a moringa soup, and also amaranthus soup. We have also, in the same factory, we have we came up with the canning of village chicken, which we call village chicken in Zambia. Everyone, when you say village chicken, they know what you're talking about, but it is simply free-range chickens, and also goat meat. Why we went into these areas, that we looked at the farmers that once they have supplied the vegetables to us, and especially Zambia where we have one season, it means that the farmers will be dormant until the next season comes. So we had to look at what else can we do to occupy the farmers, especially that I am an innovator. So all the time I always look for new things. And even when you look at my book, you find that most of the recipes which are in that book, the Suntan Cookbook, have just actually created them and take them to the lab. Once they have been analyzed and they qualify, then I put them as part of the recipe. So equally with this, the goat meat, when we started canning, we looked at the situation that how could we help the farmers. And when we started buying the chickens from them and the goats, the NGOs came in and they started now promoting these farmers to grow more chickens and also to grow more goats, which later they were supplying to us. So in short, what I'm trying to say is that to promote the indigenous recipes, I've discovered to say that that is one of the best things one could do, you know, to help the community as well as the nation. I can give an example of Zambia. The situation was quite bad before lockdown, where malnutrition was the order of the day. But when we started training these farmers, we did not want to start the training from the urban areas because we knew that we were not going to achieve what we're looking for. But starting from the rural areas, it has really helped us quite a lot. With the 20,000 farmers that we have trained, if anyone walked into their communities, they have come to understand the use of the importance of nutrition compared to the ones who are in urban areas. Those are the culprits actually who in most cases they kill themselves because they do not understand what type of food to eat. But the rural area, the rural dwellers, they understand it very, very well. And even their children, when you look at their children, some of them, you can see how the children have improved by eating the same food which they used to eat. Because in our teaching, in our programming, we've included the nutrition aspect and also the entrepreneurship, so that these farmers, as we are training them, they should understand that it is not charity, but it is a business. And because of that, this food which they sell to us, they also retain some, which they use now to feed their children and themselves.
Yeah.
David, with this, what I've just explained, I feel that in a way we have contributed tremendously to national development.
Yeah, Sylvia, thank you so much. And there's such a wealth of learning and insight and opportunity in what you just said, which I've had the chance to see on the ground with you a little bit in Zambia, and it's remarkable. We only have 5 minutes left on this call, so with your permission, let me run us through a couple of wrap-up points. But I don't want to talk much. I really want to hear each of you talk more. So let me pose a question and then say a couple of things while you think about your answer. And then maybe Sean and Martin, Sylvia, if you can offer just a last 1 or 2 minutes of comments, and we need to sign off. But Sylvia just illustrated so many aspects of what we've been discussing, of the relationship between nutrition and individual products and taste and cultural connection and economic opportunity and health, and how, in my opinion, it all comes together in a massive opportunity, right? This is not, as she said, this is not a charity project. This is a huge opportunity. It's just not mainstream yet. Let me mention to everybody else who's watching that Sylvia and Sean and Marta and I and a number of others will be together in person a couple months from now at a 2-day gathering in New Mexico, and I'm very excited to have the chance to develop these ideas and the connection to schools, and also the question, and this is where the public who's listening, anybody else, please send us your input on this. But there's a real question here for me in my work of how do we introduce this opportunity in new communities, not to new communities, because they're the ones who are going to drive it. But we're working very hard on the right ways, successful ways of helping spark this insight in local change makers so that it takes off all over the place. Anybody can view the transcript or the follow-up to this call at huddles.ashoka.org online or at nourishmen.com. You can also sign up there with your name and email if you'd like to be kept in the loop about everything we're trying to do here. My final comment around the table, and we really just have 1 minute each, is anything you want to say, but also if you can make some point about what you've had to do that's different than if you were just setting up a normal sustainable foods restaurant. Is there anything you've done that you would really point to if there's somebody in a community somewhere watching the transcript of this discussion, and you would say, look, here's a couple things you need to think about that will distinguish what we're doing from other restaurants? What would that be? Sean, any thoughts there?
Sure. You know, I think with the work that we've done, we've been very disciplined about how we approach the foods. So we try to cook extremely regional, micro-regional with that, and we've cut out all, you know, European influences like dairy and wheat flour and processed sugar. We're not even using beef, pork, or chicken. So we're really trying to utilize only the foods and flavors that were in the regions that we're cooking at. And I think utilizing that discipline and making foods with only traditional ingredients has really helped us come quite a long ways with the foods that we're able to prepare. And it really helps keep it authentic. You know, it helps keep it just more traditional in flavor and base. And, you know, we're relearning a lot of these very simple and beautiful methods and able to share a lot of this with other people. So I think having that kind of discipline, you know, really goes a long ways.
Super. Thanks so much for joining, especially out of the fact that you're in the middle of another event with chefs in Denmark right now. So
thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Marta?
No, I think the important thing from our end is to, like Sean says, you know, use the power and the current fashion of gastronomy and food and incredible chefs that are really awakening many minds, many initiatives, and they can be a driver for social change, not only at a scale of the examples that we're looking at, but even at a minor, regional, you know, global scale. All of a sudden, it's just waking up people. Okay, you begin with the chef, with wonderful food, wonderful innovation, but behind that chef have to be a whole set of ecosystem of organizations and people and producers and communities and issues that I think the limit is, you know, unlimited. You know, we really have a huge potential, and I invite everybody to, as a consumer, also try to support those initiatives, and we can really make it a much more regenerative economy.
Thank you. That's the point. Sylvia, thank you again for sticking with us today. And do you have any additional thoughts before we sign off?
Yes, David, just in 1 minute. I feel proud that we have helped quite a lot the community, especially because these are people who started, you know, with nothing. But after training them, we have not ended up there. We are now encouraging them. We have even opened the second university, which is for competence-based modular training, where these are women or men who never thought that they would ever step their foot into the university. But we have a university in the corporate belt which deals with just competence. As long as someone has got the idea and the zeal wanting to, improve his knowledge, we are now training them. And our place is always full, David, because these are women who thought that they had nothing in society, but we have put them back into society by giving them that education.
Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you. It's so helpful and provocative, and we're going to keep doing this. Let me mention that the next Ashoka Huddle on nourishment economies, the second in our series in May of this year, is on enterprises that we call biodiversifiers. A number with social entrepreneurs like Marta and Sean and Sylvia that we work with on enterprises and initiatives that either intentionally or just as a result multiply biodiversity in the areas and regions in which they work. So please join for that. You can see the whole list of huddles and other activities we're trying to implement at www.nourishn.com. And I want to thank everybody one more time for joining us today. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Great to meet you all.
Thank you.
Okay. See you soon.